The classic piano music echoed, weaving a shimmering tapestry of sound that enveloped the white birch dream resort. The golden glow from the crystal chandeliers, hanging like inverted clusters of stars, reflected off the marble floor, creating a miniature universe of luxury and power. Tonight, Caldwell Holdings was celebrating its 50th anniversary, and every corner of the ballroom was filled with cheerful laughter, the clinking of glasses, and elegant praises. Yet amidst this brilliant universe, one star was submerged in darkness. Amara Caldwell, 16, sat in her wheelchair in a secluded corner beside a large vase filled with white lilies. The heady scent of the flowers became stifling, as if trying to overpower another scent. She desperately wanted to forget the sterile smell of the hospital, the burning rubber from the accident, and the odor of despair. Her sparkling aquamarine gown, which should have made her the center of attention, now only emphasized her solitude in a world she had once been an indispensable part of. Amara wasn't sad. She was furious. A seething anger bubbled in her chest, hot as molten lava. She was angry at her own helplessness, angry at the legs that had once been her pride, now just a burden. She closed her eyes, and in her mind she saw herself standing on a dazzling stage, her bare feet on the cold floor, executing a perfect pirouette. Every movement was graceful and decisive, the mark of a talented ballerina. She had been that person, a vibrant star of the dance world, with a dream of becoming a choreographer. But it all ended because of a truck that ran a red light. A crash, a deafening sound, and her world collapsed. Since the accident, Amara felt like a broken doll. People treated her with pity, a feeling she hated more than anything. They looked at her as if she were an unpleasant reminder of life's fragility. Her father, Arthur Caldwell, a titan of the business world, who could change the atmosphere just by entering a room, was now quieter. A stroke 3 days after the accident had robbed him of part of his strength. Now he too sat in a different wheelchair, silent and sorrowful. The Ice Princess. That was the nickname people gave Amara. She didn't fight it, for coldness was the perfect shield to hide her emotional wounds. She had learned to avoid people's gazes, had grown accustomed to being invisible. A photographer once even asked her to move so she wouldn't ruin the composition. She remained silent then, but within her a flame of resentment ignited. Amara sighed softly, running her hand over her aquamarine dress. She had once thought her life would be a brilliant symphony, but now it was just an endless rest. Just then, a figure appeared. It was a black woman, neatly dressed in a server's uniform. She moved gently, gliding through the noisy crowds. Amara had seen her several times tonight. Unlike the other servers who always kept their heads down and avoided eye contact, this woman had warm, steady eyes. She didn't shy away, nor was she curious. She simply observed as if she were used to seeing what others didn't. The first time she saw Amara sitting alone. The second time she noticed that no one approached her. The third time she saw a profound sadness in Amara's eyes. And this time she decided she couldn't be indifferent any longer. She slowly approached Amara's corner. "Why are you sitting here all by yourself, sweetie?" Her voice was as gentle as a lullaby, yet it resonated like a bell in Amara's ears. She started looking up, unsure if she was imagining things. But no, the woman was standing there, a kind smile on her face. I'm fine," Amara replied, her voice tense and defensive. The woman said nothing, just offered a slight smile. She placed a small plate of canapés on the table, then gently sat down in the empty chair beside her. "This party is missing its brightest light." Amara almost laughed. "Everyone's busy," she said, trying to sound nonchalant. "I don't belong here." "It's not that you don't belong," the woman replied, her eyes full of understanding. "It's that they've forgotten how to see people who remind them of life's difficult truths." Those words touched something deep within Amara. She looked at the woman in front of her, truly seeing her this time, and saw a beauty that didn't come from clothes or jewelry, but from her life experiences, from invisible scars. "What's your name?" Amara asked, her voice less strained. "Alara Monroe," she replied. "And you, Amara? That's a beautiful name." Amara was flustered. She didn't know what to say. For the past years she had grown so accustomed to silence that being seen felt foreign, something both frightening and wonderful. She felt as if a door had quietly opened. Alara stayed for a few more minutes. The space between them, initially awkward, now became strangely warm and peaceful. She didn't ask many questions. She just listened. Alara had a strange power. She didn't just hear what Amara said, but also what she didn't say. "Before the accident, I was a dancer." Amara confessed, her voice softening. "I was going to be a choreographer." Alara nodded, her face full of empathy. "Yes, my mother said my daughter was like that too. Almost broke a wooden table trying to practice a move." Suddenly, Amara smiled. It was a genuine smile, not the practiced, strained one she used to deal with others. Alara had accomplished something that her entire family and the best psychologists couldn't. She made her laugh. "I was on the Lincoln school team," Amara continued, her voice full of nostalgia. "That night we were on our way to a charity gala. A truck ran a red light." Her voice trailed off. Alara said nothing, simply took Amara's hand. It was a gentle grip, but it held a deep empathy. She didn't ask for more details or show pity. She simply let Amara feel that she was not alone. "My father, he's the same," Amara whispered. "He used to be such a powerful man. His voice could silence a room. But after my accident, he had a stroke. Now he just sits quietly in his room day after day." Alara sighed, looking over at Arthur Caldwell, who was sitting in his own wheelchair with his secretary Evelyn Sinclair standing by his side. Evelyn's face always held a look of perfect, stern composure. She represented a world Amara had once lived in, a world of perfection rules and no room for mistakes. "A funny thing about dance," Alara said, her voice dropping to a whisper, as if sharing a secret. "People think it's all about your feet and the rhythm. But really it's about listening to the music, listening to yourself, listening to the person you want to become again." Amara looked at Alara, and for the first time she felt she was seeing not just a server, but a woman with a story, a soul. Did you ever dance?" Amara asked. Alara smiled, her eyes twinkling as if recalling a distant memory. "I was a tap dancer," she replied. "In Atlanta, 1985. Not on big stages, just church halls, small shows, until I lost a leg to diabetes. But in my mind, I've never stopped dancing. Every Sunday when the choir starts, I still dance in my bones." Alara's words were like a flame, igniting something within Amara. She looked into the woman's eyes, and she knew she wasn't lying. She had experienced loss, but she hadn't lost her spirit. Amara felt a strange urge, a desire to share, to trust. She wanted to tell Alara about Moon River, the song her father and she used to waltz to every New Year's Eve. It was a secret she had never shared with anyone. "My dad and we had a tradition," Amara began, her voice trembling with emotion. "Every New Year's Eve we'd play Moon River and waltz in the living room." "How about a seated waltz?" Alara asked unexpectedly, her eyes sparkling with a bold idea. Amara was taken aback, then gave a strained laugh. "Here, right now. Just us," Alara whispered. "No stage, no spotlights, just this corner and a promise." Amara hesitated. Her fingers tightened on the armrest of her wheelchair. She hadn't moved like that in months. But then a sense of rebellion surged within her. A part of her, the part that had once been a dancer, answered for her. She gave a faint nod. Alara stood up, set the tray aside, and held out both hands. "May I?" she asked. Amara placed her hands in Alara's. The woman's hands were surprisingly warm and steady. Alara gently swayed to the melody of Moon River, echoing from somewhere in the ballroom, and Amara followed. First she was hesitant, then full of confidence. Their hands moved to the rhythm, their bodies gently swayed, their shoulders twirling with the music. Above them, the chandelier still glittered, but for Amara, it was no longer a distant universe, but a stage for just her and Alara. As the final notes of the song faded, Amara felt her eyes well up. Alara gave a subtle nod, a gentle but meaningful gesture. "That wasn't pity," she said softly. "It was a promise kept in a new way." "Thank you," Amara whispered. Alara squeezed her hand lightly. "Don't thank me yet. The real dance has just begun." Amara watched Alara's back as she returned to her duties. For the first time in months, she didn't feel like an outsider in her own story. She felt a fire aflame that had been extinguished now smoldering in her chest, waiting for a breeze to flare up. Just then, Evelyn Sinclair's sharp, sweet voice rang out. "Maya, the guests at table 12 are waiting for their appetizers." Evelyn didn't even glance at Amara, treating her merely as an obstacle between herself and Alara. Amara looked at Evelyn, then followed Alara's retreating back. She knew that their story couldn't end with a dance in a hidden corner. Evelyn Sinclair's voice was as cold as ice, cutting through the noisy clinking of glasses. She stood there in her perfectly tailored black gown, with her hair in a neat bun and a flawless face. Evelyn was the embodiment of everything Amara had grown up with: perfection rules and an unblemished facade. She represented the face of the Caldwell Group, and to her a server like Alara was just a small detail in the grand machine not allowed to cause any incidents. Evelyn didn't even bother to glance at Amara. That was worse than pity. It was complete dismissal. To her, Amara, in her wheelchair, was simply a problem to be managed, an imperfect image to be kept in a corner. The only thing she cared about was order and the reputation of the Caldwell family. "You'd best not associate with the staff, Amara," Evelyn whispered, leaning close enough so no one else could hear. Her voice was still as sweet as sugar, but laced with a threat. "It gives people something to talk about." Amara didn't reply, but her fingers clenched the armrest of her wheelchair. Evelyn's words were like a splash of cold water extinguishing the small flame that had just been kindled within her. She felt shame not for talking to Alara, but for letting Evelyn get to her so easily. The feeling of helplessness returned heavy and terrifying. As Alara disappeared into the crowd, Amara looked over at her father. Arthur Caldwell, the man who could once change the atmosphere with his presence, now sat quietly in his wheelchair, his face weary, his eyes vacant. He too was a captive, not in a wheelchair, but within his own body. Amara felt a heart-wrenching pain seeing that image. Her father and she, two people who had once been symbols of strength and energy, now looked like two lost ghosts at their own party. Amara was used to being ignored, but seeing Alara suffer the same injustice was unbearable. Alara had given her something no one else could: validation. And Evelyn, who represented everything that had been taken from her, was now trying to take that away. In that moment, Amara realized that silence was not a solution. It was acceptance. And she, who had once been a proud ballerina, could not accept that injustice any longer. The next day, the atmosphere at the resort was cold. Amara sat in her luxurious room, looking out the window at the raindrops streaking down the pane. The gloomy sky reflected her mood. She hadn't slept all night thinking about Alara. Her anxiety grew when she didn't see Alara anywhere. She tried asking a few staff members, but they all gave evasive answers. Finally, she approached a young server named Alex, who had helped her a few times before. Alex hesitated, then whispered that Alara had been reassigned to the kitchen and might be fired for violating the code of conduct. At that moment, a fire truly ignited in Amara's heart. It was no longer anger, but determination. She couldn't let the woman who had helped her find herself again suffer because of her. Amara pushed her wheelchair to the Caldwell Group's mobile office set up in a conference room at the resort. She found Evelyn Sinclair inside reviewing financial reports. "I need to talk to you," Amara said, her voice completely devoid of weakness. Evelyn didn't look up. "If this is about Maya, it's about you," Amara cut in, her voice so sharp that Evelyn was forced to look up at her. "You have no right to fire a woman for being kind to me." Evelyn gave a faint smirk. "I was just following the rules. Staff are not permitted to have private relationships with guests, especially with a minor. It's to protect the corporation's image." "What image?" Amara wheeled her chair closer, her eyes blazing. "An image where the CEO's daughter is treated like a piece of furniture. An image where kindness is seen as a threat." Evelyn Sinclair was startled by Amara's outburst. She was used to a silent, sorrowful Amara, not this fiery one. "That's not fair," she said, her voice slightly shaky. "What's not fair is punishing someone because they showed me I was still a person." Amara said, tears beginning to roll down her cheeks. "What's not fair is that you tried to extinguish the only flame I had left." With that, Amara turned her wheelchair and left. She had said everything she needed to say, and whether Evelyn listened or not, Amara no longer cared. The important thing was that she had not remained silent. She had begun her fight. That evening, Amara sat beside her father's armchair in a room filled only with the loud sound of the television. She turned on her phone, played Moon River, and let the gentle melody fill the room. She took her father's hand, a thin and weak hand, devoid of the power of the powerful CEO he once was. "Dad," she whispered, "I'm going to find Alara. And when I do, we'll dance again. But this time I'll let the whole world see." Arthur's hand gently squeezed hers, a light but deeply understanding grip. For the first time in a year, Amara felt she was no longer just surviving. She was starting to live. She was ready to fight. The following days at the resort passed in a state of tension and weariness. Amara's words to Evelyn Sinclair didn't change anything immediately, but they created a subtle shift in the atmosphere. Evelyn now looked at Amara not with complete indifference, but with a mix of annoyance and caution. For Amara, even negative attention was better than silence. After that night, Amara couldn't stop thinking about Alara. She rummaged through her memories, trying to piece together every small detail about the woman, her warm smile, her understanding eyes, and the story of her carbon prosthetic leg. Amara realized that what she needed to do was not just protect Alara, but also to find her again, to hold on to the flame of hope she had ignited within her. With the help of Alex, the young server, Amara began her search. Alex was initially terrified. "Amara Evelyn could get me in trouble. She never forgives." "She won't forgive me either," Amara replied, a bitter smile on her face. "But Alex, if we don't do something, we'll let her coldness and perfection win. Is that what you want?" Alex looked into Amara's eyes. He saw not weakness, but an unwavering determination. He nodded. "What do you need?" Amara asked Alex to help her find information about Alara Monroe. At first it was difficult. Alara was like a ghost, existing only in the resort's personnel records. Amara tried to contact the management office, but they refused to provide any information about a fired employee citing privacy. Evelyn Sinclair had built an invisible wall blocking all of Amara's efforts. But Amara didn't give up. She had learned that when one door closes, she had to find another way. She began to use her family's own connections. She called Raymond Cole, her father's longtime legal counsel, a man who had known her since she was a child. "Raymond, I need a favor," Amara said over the phone, her voice trembling with nerves. "I need information about a former employee of the resort." Raymond, a man who was always composed, noticed the unusual tone in Amara's voice. "What is it, kiddo? Are you okay?" "I'm better than ever," Amara replied, a smile on her face. "I'm finding myself again." Just a few hours later, Raymond sent Amara an envelope. Inside was a small piece of paper with the address of a church in the center of town and the name of a local choir that Alara often attended. He also included a handwritten note, "I trust you. Use it wisely." Amara looked at the paper, her heart pounding. Alara had said she still danced in her bones whenever she heard the choir. Amara knew this was where she belonged, where she wasn't a server, but a person. The next day, Amara decided to leave the resort. She asked a taxi driver to take her to the address Raymond had provided. As her wheelchair rolled out of the luxurious resort, Amara felt as if she were escaping a cage. Her life since the accident had revolved around the resort's walls and people's whispers. Now she was venturing into a new world on her own, a world she knew nothing about. When she arrived, Amara saw a small, old church, but it was filled with a warm and peaceful atmosphere. She wheeled herself inside, and the sound of a hymn echoed from within. She saw Alara sitting in the last pew, her eyes closed, humming along with the music. Beside her was her prosthetic leg, neatly placed on the seat. In that moment, all of Amara's doubts and fears vanished. She had found Alara, and that was more important than anything else. Alara opened her eyes and saw Amara wheeling herself toward her. She wasn't surprised. She just smiled, a look of deep understanding on her face. "Well," she said, "who blew in on the wind?" "I found you," Amara said, her voice trembling with emotion. "You showed me that the dance still exists within me, and I can't let it go." Alara nodded, her face full of pride. "Now that you've found me, what are you going to do next?" "I need one more dance," Amara said with determination. "But this time I want the whole world to see." Alara's eyes lit up. "Then my girls show them something they never thought they'd see." This was the moment Amara was no longer a passive girl, but an active participant in her own story. She and Alara had found each other, and together they would create something bigger than a dance. Amara and Alara sat on a pew in the church, where the afternoon sun streamed through the stained glass windows, painting shimmering streaks of light on the tiled floor. Alara didn't ask why. Amara had looked for her, nor did she ask about the trouble Amara had caused Evelyn. She only asked how. "We need a stage," Amara said, her voice full of resolve. "Not a corner in a banquet hall, but a place where everyone can see. We need lights. We need music." Alara gave a gentle laugh. "Sounds like a big plan, my girl. Who do you think will come to watch us?" "I'll invite them," Amara replied. "The board of directors, a few staff members, and Evelyn Sinclair herself." Alara raised an eyebrow, showing a bit of surprise. "Why her?" "Because she's the one who tried to put out my fire," Amara said, her eyes full of confidence. "And I want her to see that she failed." Amara had changed. No longer the weak, timid young lady she once was, Amara had now become a warrior. Alara looked at her, and in her eyes there was no longer pity, but pride. For several hours they outlined a plan together. Amara would use her relationship with Raymond Cole to arrange a small room at the resort, a place private enough, but also official enough to invite the board members. She also asked Alex, who had helped her find Ilara, to prepare the sound and lighting systems. Every small detail was carefully planned by Amara. She didn't want any accidents to happen. "We'll dance to Moon River again," Amara said, "but this time it will have a completely different meaning." "A dance of defiance," Ilara added, a radiant smile on her face, "and of promise." Before leaving, Amara offered to drive Ilara back to the resort. Ilara smiled and said, "I'll walk. It reminds me how far I've come and that every step is precious." Watching Ilara walk away, Amara felt a deep admiration. This woman not only had courage, but also a resilient spirit. Amara knew that she had found not just a dance partner, but a mentor, someone who had shown her that life still had meaning, even when everything seemed to have fallen apart. When Amara returned to the resort, she found a letter had been delivered to her room. The envelope was pure white with the seal of the board of directors. She opened it, and inside was an official invitation to an internal meeting. Amara knew that Evelyn Sinclair had set a trap. But Amara wasn't afraid. She had a weapon that Evelyn could never have: the truth, courage, and a dance of her own. She was ready for the fight. The first part of the story had ended, but Amara and Ilara's journey had just begun. After their meeting at the church, Amara and Ilara began to plan. The bond between them, which had sprouted in loneliness, now flourished on a foundation of trust and determination. Amara, who had once lived in a world of perfection and power, was now drawn to Ilara's authenticity and courage. In turn, Ilara, a woman who had accepted her fate, found in Amara a youthful fire that had once burned within her. Every morning when the resort was still asleep, Amara and Ilara would meet in the back garden. Gone were the stiff uniforms and sparkling evening gowns. They were just two people, two souls in sync. Amara told Ilara more about her former life, the grueling hours of practice, the joy of performing on stage, and especially her close relationship with her father. She spoke of the evenings Arthur would sit and watch her rehearse, his eyes sparkling with pride. "You build beauty, I build the business," my father used to say. Amara recalled, her voice filled with emotion. "We were a team." In return, Ilara opened up more. She spoke of her childhood in Atlanta, of her dream of becoming a famous tap dancer, of performances in small churches and clubs. She spoke of her daughter Tasha, who once tried to practice a spin and nearly knocked over the family's wooden table. "Tasha cried more than I did when they had to amputate my leg." Ilara said, her eyes melancholic yet resilient. "But I told her, you don't need two legs to feel the rhythm. You just need a heart that wants to move." Those words became Amara's guiding principle. Their practice sessions were not just about dance. They were life lessons. Amara learned to feel the rhythm with her hands, her shoulders, and gentle tilts of her head. Ilara, with her carbon fiber prosthetic leg, showed Amara that imperfection wasn't a limitation. She would stand up, perform simple tap movements, and Amara would use her hands to tap the armrests of her wheelchair, creating a similar beat. They laughed together, a genuine laughter that had been forgotten for too long. During one practice, Amara suddenly asked, "Were you scared?" "Scared of what, my girl?" Ilara replied. "Scared of losing everything. Everything you built," Amara answered, looking at Ilara's prosthetic leg. "Scared that one day everything would fall apart just like my world did." Ilara fell silent, then she bent down and gently touched Amara's hand. "Every day I was scared, child. But then I remembered that when I started, I had nothing. Loss causes you pain, but it also opens a door to another path. You just have to be brave enough to walk through it." Their relationship ran deeper than friendship or mentorship. They were two kindred spirits who had found each other amidst life's struggles, healing their wounds together. As Amara's plan began to take shape, turmoil also arose. Evelyn Sinclair, with her keen managerial senses, noticed the change in Amara. She was no longer the silent ice princess, but was now vibrant and full of energy. This deeply unsettled her. She couldn't accept that a common woman like Alara could influence Amara, a person of such prestigious lineage. Evelyn summoned Amara to her office and spoke to her bluntly. "Amara, you're playing with fire. Your relationship with that woman will damage your reputation and the corporation's. News articles will appear slandering you and your father." Amara looked Evelyn straight in the eye. "Evelyn, I'd rather be remembered for finding a friend than for being forgotten in a world of fake perfection." Amara's defiance infuriated Evelyn. She decided not only to fire Alara, but also to make her disappear completely from Amara's life. She began to use her power to pressure Alex and other staff members, threatening to fire anyone associated with Amara and Alara. During a practice session, Alex came to see Amara and Alara, his face pale. "Amara, Evelyn knows about our plan. She said she'll fire me if I keep helping you." "I'm so sorry." Amara wasn't angry with Alex. She understood his fear. She herself had once felt that fear. Amara looked at Alara, who simply gave a slight nod, signaling that everything was all right. "It's okay, Alex," Amara said, her voice full of empathy. "You've already helped me so much. Thank you." After Alex left, Amara felt a profound disappointment. She had thought she could win, but it seemed Evelyn Sinclair was still too powerful. Alara came closer and placed a hand on Amara's shoulder. "Don't worry, my girl. When one door closes, we always find another one." Amara realized that her plan had been too obvious. She needed a different approach, a bolder, more unexpected one. "We can't have a normal performance," Amara told Alara. "We need to do something no one can anticipate." And then an idea flashed in Amara's mind. She called Raymond Cole, her father's legal counsel, and presented her idea. "Raymond, I need the board of directors and Evelyn Sinclair to be in the same place. I need everyone to see something they can never forget." Raymond, who had been observing Amara's change, was surprised, but also very supportive. "Amara, do you know this is a huge risk? You could lose everything." "I've already lost everything once, Raymond," Amara replied. "And I've learned that when people have nothing left to lose, they have everything to gain." With Raymond's help, Amara arranged an emergency meeting of the board of directors, citing serious internal issues related to the Caldwell Group. Evelyn Sinclair was also summoned. She arrived, her face cold and suspicious, thinking that Amara had made a mistake and would be dealt with. But when she walked into the meeting room, she was taken aback. The room wasn't a typical conference room. It was an empty space with only a piano in one corner. The lighting was dim, creating a mysterious and solemn atmosphere. In a corner of the room, Amara sat in her wheelchair, and Alara stood beside her. Amara said nothing, only looked directly at Evelyn. Her eyes held no fear, but confidence and determination. After everyone had arrived, Alara stepped into the center of the room. She was not in a uniform, nor was she holding a tray. She was wearing a simple white shirt and black trousers, with her carbon fiber prosthetic leg exposed naturally. She stood there in the middle of the room as a living declaration of courage. Amara gave a slight nod. Alara raised her hand, and the sound of Moon River emanated from the piano. She didn't dance. She just stood silently listening. And then Amara began. She used her hands, her shoulders to move to the rhythm. She gently spun her wheelchair like a dancer twirling on a stage. Everyone in the room was silent, captivated by Amara's emotional performance. Evelyn Sinclair, who had initially been scornful, was now silent herself. The performance wasn't meant to impress, but to tell a story, the story of a girl who had once fallen and was now standing up stronger than ever. When the music ended, Amara and Alara stood side by side facing the board of directors. The room remained silent until Raymond Cole stood up and applauded. Then a few other members also stood and clapped. Amara's performance not only changed people's perception of her, but also changed their perspective on the values they had upheld for so long. After the emotional performance, the room fell silent. Evelyn Sinclair was the first to break it. She didn't applaud, but her eyes were no longer scornful, replaced by stunned surprise. She had not anticipated that Amara could be so strong. Her perfection had been challenged by something completely uncontrollable emotion. Raymond Cole. Amara's father's legal counsel stood up. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice deep and authoritative, "we have just witnessed not just a dance, but a declaration. Amara Caldwell has found her voice again. And she did it with the help of a woman we have treated unjustly." Raymond looked directly at Evelyn. "We've talked about reputation, about image, but we've forgotten the most important thing, the core values of a corporation. The Caldwell Group was built on resilience and courage. And tonight, Amara has fully embodied both." He turned to Amara and Alara. "Regarding the case of Miss Alara Monroe, the board of directors has met privately and unanimously agreed that the decision to terminate her was unfounded. Her position has been immediately reinstated." Amara looked at Alara and saw tears in her eyes. She said nothing, just gave a light nod. Yet Amara understood. They had won. Evelyn Sinclair stood up, her face rigid. She walked out of the room without a word. Her silence spoke volumes. She had failed. "With all due respect," Alara said, her voice ringing clearly in the room, "I cannot return to being a server." Everyone in the room was surprised. Raymond frowned. "I'm sorry, I don't understand." Amara, with the confidence of a victor, wheeled her chair forward. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice filled with authority and self-assurance just as her father's once had been. "We have a proposal." Raymond handed the board of directors a set of documents. It was a detailed plan for a new project titled Still Moving Project. This project was not just a simple dance class, but an adaptive arts center offering dance classes, therapy, and counseling for people with disabilities and the elderly. "We need the corporation's sponsorship," Amara said, looking at each member directly. "This is not just a charity project. It's a legacy. A legacy of courage, resilience, and compassion." An elderly board member, Elias Thorne, who was known for his conservatism, flipped through the documents. He looked at Amara, then at Alara. "My dear," he said, his voice filled with emotion, "your letter reminded me why this company was founded. Not just for profit, but for people." "I agree," another member said. "A project like this will change the entire community. We will fund this project." Everyone applauded. Amara's performance had not only changed people's perception of her, but it also changed the direction of a major corporation. After the meeting concluded, Amara went to Alara. The two embraced a hug filled with tears and joy. Alara was the first to light the flame in Amara, and now that flame had erupted, spreading its light to the world. "We did it, Alara," Amara said, her voice choked with emotion. "No, my girl," Alara replied. "You did it. I was just the one who reminded you where the music was." After that night, Amara no longer felt like an outcast. She had found her purpose, and she knew that her journey, and Alara's the journey of the Still Moving Project, had only just begun. With the board of directors' approval, Amara and Alara began the work of turning their dream into reality. They weren't just building a class. They were building a home for souls that had once been forgotten. The allocated area was an old Caldwell Group conference room, a space that was once gloomy and soulless. However, in Amara and Alara's eyes, it was a blank canvas ready to be painted with the colors of life. They worked tirelessly. Amara, with the sharp mind of someone familiar with her father's business, handled the administrative, financial, and public relations aspects. She proved that her intellect and determination were in no way hindered by her wheelchair. Alara, with her experience and passion, was in charge of content and classes. She created a unique teaching method that focused not on dance technique, but on feeling the rhythm. "We're not teaching them to dance," Alara told Amara. "We're teaching them how to feel the music, how to listen to their bodies, how to find their voices again." The bare walls were gradually filled with vibrant portraits of dancers. Not portraits of perfect ballet dancers, but portraits of the project's participants, a boy using crutches to dance an elderly woman twirling in a wheelchair, and an older man using a cane for balance. Each portrait was accompanied by an inspiring quote such as, "The dance is not in the feet, but in the heart," from one of the participants. The project attracted a large number of people. They came from all walks of life with different stories and circumstances. A young girl with autism, who hadn't spoken in years, began to sing along to a song. A veteran who had lost a leg and had been living in silence began to clap along to the rhythm. Amara and Alara weren't just founders. They were witnesses to the small miracles that happened every day. During one practice session, as Amara was showing a boy in a wheelchair how to use his hands to create a beat, he suddenly burst out laughing. It was a clear, genuine laugh, one that Amara hadn't heard in years. That moment brought tears to her eyes. She had not only found her purpose, but was also helping others find theirs. The still-moving project grew rapidly and attracted media attention. A series of articles appeared praising Amara's courage and humanistic spirit. However, with fame also came challenges. An article in a major business newspaper raised a skeptical question: a humanitarian project or a Caldwell Group PR stunt? The article analyzed the project's funding, implying that Amara was simply using her story to rebuild her family's image after scandals related to their cold demeanor. It also attacked Alara, calling her a promoted server-turned-director, questioning her competence. Amara read the article, her hands trembling. She felt as if she had been stabbed in the back. All her efforts, all her sincerity, had been distorted. A familiar fear returned, the fear of being judged, the fear of being misunderstood, the fear that everything she and Alara had built would collapse. As Amara had predicted, Evelyn Sinclair appeared. She visited the center, but not to congratulate them. She stood there with a cold expression and a scrutinizing gaze. "Amara," she said, her voice still sweet but full of menace. "You built this too fast. Everything in business has risks, and public sympathy is the most fragile thing. One small mistake could bring it all down." Evelyn didn't directly interfere, but her words sowed doubt in Amara's mind. She began to wonder if she was moving too fast, if she was strong enough to protect the project. Alara noticed Amara's anxiety. "They don't understand us, my girl," she said. "They don't understand that this project wasn't built with money, but with faith. And faith is something that cannot be bought or destroyed." "But they're shaping how people see us," Amara replied, her voice filled with despair. "If we lose their trust, we lose everything." "Then you have to show them," Alara said, her eyes full of determination. "You have to show them that this project is real, that it's not a fairy tale, but a life." Listening to Alara's advice, Amara made a bold decision. She would not react with silence. She would respond by showing everyone the truth, by showing them that the dance of fire and soul was not a PR stunt, but a living entity, a legacy built from love and resilience. Amara didn't let the criticism deter her. She had learned from Alara that the best way to deal with darkness is not to fight it, but to light a candle. Amara decided to hold a press conference, but not at a fancy hotel. It would be right at the Still Moving Project Center. On the day of the press conference, the room was filled with light, with portraits of the project's members hung proudly on the walls. The journalists, who initially came with skepticism, were gradually drawn in by the warm and vibrant atmosphere. Amara, in her wheelchair, began her speech. She didn't talk about profits, reputation, or numbers. She talked about stories. She told the story of a veteran who had found joy again after years of living in silence. She told the story of an 80-year-old woman who had thought her life was over, but was now able to gently waltz. She told her own story of a girl who had once collapsed and lost everything, and had now found her purpose. "This is not a PR project," Amara said, her voice full of emotion. "This is a living thing. It was built with tears, with resilience, and with faith. If you are still skeptical, I invite you to stay. Talk to our members, feel their rhythm, and ask yourselves, can the truth be faked?" After Amara's speech, the reporters stayed. They didn't just interview Amara. They talked to the project's members. One reporter asked a boy in a wheelchair, "What do you think about people saying this project is just a trick?" The boy, with a radiant smile, replied, "I don't know what a trick is, but I know that here I've found friends, and I've found joy. That's the truth." The subsequent articles changed. One reporter wrote, "We came looking for a story about artifice, but we found a story about truth." The criticism gradually faded. The Still Moving Project not only survived, but became stronger. Amara and Alara had proven that courage and authenticity are the most powerful weapons. Although she had won the battle against criticism, Amara never stopped striving. She didn't just stop at developing the project. She began to build a legacy. She and Alara co-wrote a book sharing the stories of people who had found their rhythm again. The book became a great source of inspiration, not just for people with disabilities, but for anyone facing challenges. One evening, as Amara and Alara sat together, looking out the window at the project's members dancing together, Amara asked Alara, "Are you scared, Alara? Scared that one day everything will fall apart?" Alara smiled, her eyes still warm and full of understanding. "Every day I am scared, my girl. But I also believe that we started this with a question. And we answered it with music, with dances, and with hearts that never stopped moving." Amara nodded. She knew that her journey and Alara's were far from over. They had built a legacy not with statues, but with hearts. And that is a legacy that will last forever. 6 months later, the Still Moving Project had grown bigger than ever, spreading from Austin to Dallas, San Antonio, and even Atlanta. The project was no longer a small charity organization. It had become a movement, a name spoken with pride, not pity. Amara and Alara, from two solitary women, had now become the leaders of a revolution. The biggest event in their journey was the National Still Moving Project Conference held in a renovated old train station in Chicago, which had been transformed into a community arts center. This place, once the arrival and departure point for thousands of trains, now became the meeting point for over 400 participants from across the country. Amara, in her wheelchair, entered the main hall with a confident and powerful demeanor. Alara, who was always by her side, walked next to her. They were not just co-founders. They were the soul of the project. There were no more whispers, no more scrutinizing glances. Instead, there were smiles and nods of admiration from everyone. Amara's opening speech echoed throughout the main hall. She didn't talk about success, but about loss, about the wounds she once had. "I used to think that broken meant the end." Amara began, her voice full of emotion. "But I learned that broken can also mean open." This movement didn't start with a performance. but with a very simple question: why are you sitting here all by yourself? She looked over at Alara, who was standing in a corner of the stage, smiling with pride. And from that question, we have answered with steps, with claps, with breaths. We are not here for the world to validate us. We are here to remind each other that dance is not something to be earned, but something to be owned. After the speech, the entire hall erupted in applause. But for Amara, it all became meaningless because she was waiting for one person. When she was called backstage, an old man was sitting there in his own wheelchair. It was her father, Arthur Caldwell. His health had deteriorated significantly, but his eyes were still bright and observant. "I had to be here," he whispered, his frail hand trembling slightly. "You made it," Amara said, tears already streaming down her cheeks. "You made it." "No," he gently corrected her, his voice full of affection. "You made it." Arthur gave Amara a small wooden box. Inside was a ring, her mother's wedding ring. "Your mother used to tap this ring on the table whenever she was nervous," he said. "She said it reminded her of her father's heartbeat. Now it's yours." Amara took the ring. It was warm, as if it had a life of its own. This was not just a gift, but a legacy and acceptance. The closing ceremony took place in an emotional atmosphere. This time there was no stage, no audience. Everyone was a participant. Amara and Alara danced together. But their dance was no longer a two-person performance. It was a dance of everyone. People with crutches, people in wheelchairs, the elderly, everyone joined in with the music. And in that moment, Amara witnessed the most miraculous thing in her life. Her father, Arthur Caldwell, was sitting quietly in a corner. With the help of his caregiver, his hand gently rose and tapped the armrest of his wheelchair in rhythm. It was his heartbeat, the heartbeat of a father and daughter. A heartbeat that had once been forgotten, now found again. When the music ended, Amara went to her father. He took her hand, tears rolling down his face. "My daughter," he said, his voice hoarse. "You are my pride." Amara said nothing, just rested her head on his hand. All the pain, all the loneliness of the past had now vanished. She had not only found her dance, but had also found her father's love and acceptance. The story had ended, but Amara and Alara's legacy would live on. The Still Moving Project had become a national organization, bringing hope to millions. Amara was now not just a survivor, but a guide. She no longer felt like a broken doll, but a flame, a resilient soul. And it all began with a very simple question, a question that changed everything. "Why are you sitting here all by yourself, sweetie?"